Dr. Jiho Park pressed his hand against the thick glass window of the Olympus Mons research station. The massive volcano rose before him, its slope stretching endlessly into the red Martian sky. After 5 years of studying Mars' largest mountain, he thought he knew all its secrets. He was wrong. "Dr. Park, you need to see this." Ha-Won Kim's voice came through his communication device. The excitement in her voice made him turn away from the window immediately. Jiho walked quickly through the station's main corridor, his footsteps echoing in the quiet space. The research station, built in 2157, was humanity's most advanced facility on Mars. Its white walls and bright lights made it feel like a hospital on Earth, except for the red dust that always found its way inside. He found Ha-Won in the monitoring room. She sat in front of a large screen showing waves of colored lines, their new seismic monitoring system's display. Captain Sun Mi stood behind her, arms crossed, staring at the screen with narrow eyes. "Look at these readings," Ha-Won said, pointing to a pattern of red lines. "They're completely different from anything we've seen before." Jiho leaned closer to the screen. After 20 years as a geologist, he knew what volcanic activity should look like. These patterns were wrong. They were too regular, too organized. "How deep are these coming from?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "That's the strange part," Sun Mi said, moving closer. "They're coming from 30 kilometers below the surface, in a perfect circle around the base of Olympus Mons." Jiho felt his heart beat faster. "Show me the pattern over the last 24 hours. Ha-Won typed quickly on her keyboard. The screen changed, showing a day's worth of data. Jiho's eyes widened. The pattern wasn't random at all. It repeated every 6 hours, like a clock. "Nature doesn't work like this," he said quietly. "These patterns, they're artificial." Sun Mi straightened up. As the mission commander, she had to think about safety first. "Are you saying someone built something under the largest volcano in the solar system?" "Or something," Ha-Won added, her voice barely a whisper. Jiho walked to another screen and pulled up their ground-penetrating radar data. "Look here," he said, pointing to dark shapes in the mountain's interior. "We always thought these were natural caves or lava tubes. But what if they're not?" The three scientists stood in silence, looking at the images that challenged everything they knew about Mars. Olympus Mons wasn't just a volcano. It might be the biggest structure ever built by intelligent hands. "We need to go down there," Jiho said firmly. "These readings, they're like a heartbeat, and it's getting stronger." Sun Mi nodded slowly. "I'll contact Earth Control, but we need to be careful about how we report this. If we're right." She didn't finish her sentence. They all knew what this meant. Ha-Won suddenly pointed at the screen. "Look, the pattern, it's changing." They watched as the regular lines began to shift. Deep beneath Mars' surface, something was waking up, something that had waited millions of years to be found. Jiho looked back through the window at Olympus Mons. The mountain stood silent against the Martian sky. But now he saw it differently. It wasn't just a natural wonder anymore. It was a door, and they had just found the key. "Whatever built this," he said, "they wanted it to be found eventually. They left us a map." He pointed to the repeated patterns. "These aren't just signals. They're instructions." Sun Mi picked up her tablet. "I'm calling an emergency team meeting. Everyone needs to hear this." She paused at the door. "And Jiho, make sure all this data is backed up. Multiple copies." As his colleagues left the room, Jiho stayed behind, studying the patterns. In all his years of studying Mars, he had dreamed of making a big discovery. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. Olympus Mons wasn't just a mountain. It was a message, written in stone and waiting for humanity to find it. The real question was, what would they find when they answered it? The elevator moved slowly down the shaft that the team had drilled into Olympus Mons. Jiho watched the depth meter. 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, 20 kilometers below the surface. The reinforced capsule carrying him, Ha-1, and Sun-Mei creaked under the immense pressure. 25 kilometers, Ha-1 announced, checking her instruments. The signal is getting stronger. 3 days had passed since they discovered the strange patterns beneath Mars' largest volcano. Earth Control had given them permission to investigate, but with strict rules. They had to turn back at the first sign of danger. Temperature is holding steady, Sun-Mei said, surprised. It should be much hotter at this depth. She looked at her tablet. The rocks around us, they're cooling themselves somehow. Jai-Ho nodded. More proof this isn't natural. He checked his own device, which showed a detailed map of the tunnel ahead. We're almost at the source of the signal. The elevator stopped at 30 kilometers below the surface. The doors opened to reveal a perfectly circular tunnel. Their lights showed smooth walls that couldn't have been made by nature. Look at these walls, Jai-Ho said, running his gloved hand along the surface. They're made of some kind of processed material. It's stronger than any rock I've studied. They walked carefully through the tunnel, their boots making soft sounds on the ancient floor. After about 100 meters, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Impossible, Ha-1 whispered. Their lights revealed a room larger than a football stadium, filled with rows of tall metal columns. Each column had strange symbols carved into its surface. The symbols glowed with a faint blue light. The signal is coming from these columns, Ha-1 said, checking her readings. They're machines, still running after millions of years. Sun-Mei touched one of the columns carefully. As soon as her hand made contact, the blue light grew brighter. More lights began to turn on throughout the chamber, revealing its true size. It's some kind of control room, Jai-Ho said, excitement making his voice shake. The patterns we detected, they weren't random signals. The system was running tests, preparing itself. A soft humming filled the air. In the center of the chamber, a large circular platform began to glow. Above it, a hologram appeared, showing a map of Mars. Red dots marked the locations of all major volcanoes on the planet. They're all connected, Ha-1 said, understanding dawning on her face. Olympus Mons, the Tharsis volcanoes. They're all part of one system. Jai-Ho walked to a panel covered in symbols. Unlike the others, these weren't glowing. They seemed to be instructions written in the ancient builder's language. We need to document everything, Sun-Mei ordered, already taking photos. Earth Control needs to see this immediately. Suddenly, the humming changed pitch. New symbols appeared in the hologram, moving too fast to read. The chamber's lights pulsed with increasing speed. Something's happening, Ha-1 said, checking her instruments. The energy readings are climbing rapidly. The ground beneath their feet vibrated. Above them, through 30 kilometers of rock, they heard a deep rumble from Olympus Mons itself. It's not just waking up, Jai-Ho realized, watching the hologram change. It's activating the other volcanoes too. The whole network is coming online. Sun-Mei grabbed her radio. Base, this is the exploration team. We need immediate monitoring of all major Martian volcanoes. Something big is happening. As they watched, the hologram zoomed out to show not just Mars, but the space around it. A blinking red light appeared at the edge of the map, moving slowly toward their planet. That's why the system is activating, Jai-Ho said quietly. It detected something coming, something it was built to watch for. The three scientists stood in the ancient control room, surrounded by technology millions of years old but more advanced than anything humanity had built. They had found what they were looking for, but now they faced a bigger question. What had found them? Dr. Tae-Young Choi stood at the edge of Valles Marineris, Mars' greatest canyon. The morning sun cast long shadows across its vast width. Even through his helmet's visor, the view took his breath away. The canyon stretched farther than the eye could see, deep enough to swallow Earth's greatest mountains. The signal is stronger here, Jai-Ho's voice came through the radio. He stood nearby, holding a device that tracked the energy patterns they had discovered under Olympus Mons. 2 weeks had passed since their discovery in the volcano. Now they searched for answers in Mars' biggest canyon. Earth Control had sent Tae-young to help them understand the ancient writing they had found. "These walls," Tae-young said, studying the rocky surface through special cameras. "They're not natural. Look at these patterns." He pointed to lines that seemed random at first glance, but repeated every few meters. Hai-1 walked up beside him, carrying her own instruments. "You're right. The whole canyon. Someone shaped it this way on purpose." Their rovers waited behind them, loaded with equipment. Sun-mai worked at a portable computer station she had set up, studying data from satellites overhead. "The energy readings form a path," Sun-mai called out. "They lead deeper into the canyon, toward that large cliff face." The team drove their rovers carefully down the canyon slope. The path was rough, but the machines handled it well. After an hour, they'd reached the spot Sun-mai had identified. "There," Tae-young said, pointing at the cliff wall. "Those markings, they're the same writing we found in Olympus Mons." Jae-ho pressed his hand against the rock wall. Like before, symbols began to glow with a blue light. A deep rumbling sound came from within the cliff. "Stand back," Sun-mai ordered. The rock wall split open, revealing a hidden entrance. Cool air rushed out of the darkness beyond. "Another facility," Ha-1 said, checking her instruments. "But this one is different. The energy signature isn't the same as the one in the volcano." They walked through the entrance, their lights showing a long corridor that sloped down into Mars' crust. The walls here were covered in drawings and symbols. "These tell a story," Tae-young said, filming everything with his camera. "They show the building of the volcanoes, the cutting of this canyon." He paused at one image. "And they show why." The image showed strange ships in space, and beneath them, Mars' surface changing. The volcanoes grew taller. The canyon grew deeper. They didn't just build things on Mars, Jae-ho realized. They rebuilt the whole planet, changed its surface to create this defense system. The corridor led them to another large room. This one held what looked like giant machines, covered in dust but still somehow working. "It's a control center, like the one under Olympus Mons," Sun-mai said. "But this one seems to control the canyon itself." Ha-1 studied her readings. "The canyon isn't just a canyon. It's a giant." She stopped, checking her data again. "It's a weapon. The whole canyon is one massive weapon." Suddenly, all the symbols in the room began to glow brighter. A new hologram appeared, showing the same blinking light they had seen before, now much closer to Mars. "Whatever's coming," Tae-young said, "these builders left us everything we need to fight it." He pointed to a series of symbols. "These aren't just decoration. They're instructions. They tell us how to use all of this. Then we better learn fast," Sun-mai said, looking at the approaching light in the hologram. "Because I don't think we have much time left." As if answering her words, a low sound filled the canyon, like a giant machine waking up after millions of years of sleep. Mars' greatest canyon was coming alive, ready to reveal its true purpose at last. The team's rovers moved slowly across the vast plain of Hellas Planitia. This giant crater, the largest impact site on Mars, stretched for thousands of kilometers in every direction. The morning sun cast long shadows behind scattered rocks and ancient dust dunes. "The energy readings are different here," Ha-1 said, watching her instruments. "Not like the volcano or the canyon. This place has its own pattern." Jae-ho drove the lead rover, following the signal that had drawn them to this enormous basin. Behind him, Sun-mai and Tae-young rode in the second rover, carrying their research equipment. "Look there," Sun-mai called over the radio. She pointed to a group of unusual rock formations ahead. "Those shapes aren't natural." They stopped the rovers near the strange rocks. Up close, the team could see that these weren't rocks at all. They were buildings, mostly buried under millions of years of Martian dust. "These are halls of some kind," Tae-young said, brushing red dust from one wall. And look, more of the ancient writing. The symbols here were different from those they had found before. These looked older, as if they had been carved before the ones in Olympus Mons and Valles Marineris. This was their city, Jiho realized, looking around with wide eyes. Before they built the defense system, they lived here. Sunmai set up their portable drilling equipment. The strongest signals are coming from underground. We need to see what's below. The drill worked quickly, cutting through layers of rock and dust. At 30 meters down, it hit something solid, something that wasn't rock. Metal, Ha-won said, checking the drill's readings. A huge piece of metal buried under the crater. They widened the hole and sent down lights and cameras. The images showed a vast room filled with strange machines and what looked like computer screens, all covered in dust, but somehow still working. It's some kind of library, Tae-young said, studying the symbols on the walls. No, more than that. It's their history. He pointed to one set of symbols that glowed brighter than the others. And I think I can read these now. The team carefully climbed down into the room. As they entered, lights began to turn on by themselves, revealing the true size of the space. It was enormous, stretching far beyond their light's reach. The symbols, Sunmai said, walking to one wall. They're changing, responding to our presence. Tae-young moved closer to the wall, his eyes moving quickly over the changing symbols. They're telling us a story about what happened to them, about what's coming. Suddenly, a new hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed Mars as it had been millions of years ago, green with oceans and clouds. Then it showed ships arriving, the same ships they had seen in the canyon's images. They came here before, Jiho said quietly. The ancient Martians fought them off, but at a terrible cost. He pointed to the next image, which showed Mars turning red and dry. They had to sacrifice their world to save it. That's why they built everything, Ha-won added. The volcanoes, the canyon, this crater, it's all part of a defense system. They knew the enemy would return someday. The hologram changed again, showing the blinking light they had seen before. It was much closer now, almost at the edge of their solar system. We need to tell Earth immediately, Sunmai said, reaching for her radio. Whatever's coming, it's the same thing that destroyed Mars. And this time, they're heading for both our worlds. As if responding to her words, all the machines in the room began to power up. Screens lit with data, and new symbols appeared on every wall. The ancient Martians had left them everything they needed to know. Now they just had to learn how to use it before it was too late. Back at the Olympus Mons research station, Jiho watched the main screen with growing concern. Red dots blinked across the map of Mars, showing activity at every major volcano on the planet. The whole system is connecting, Ha-won said, typing quickly at her computer. Everything we activated. The volcanoes, the canyon, the crater. They're all talking to each other now. 3 days had passed since their discovery in Hellas Planitia. Earth Control had been meeting constantly, trying to decide what to do with the information about the approaching threat. The ancient Martians left us a working defense system, Sunmai said, standing behind them. But we still don't know how to use it properly. Tae-young sat at another desk, surrounded by screens showing translations of the ancient writing. According to these texts, the system needs time to fully wake up, time we might not have. Suddenly, all the lights in the station flickered. The ground beneath them trembled slightly. Energy spike at Olympus Mons, Ha-won announced, checking her readings. The biggest one yet. They rushed to the observation window. Outside, in the thin Martian atmosphere, they could see strange lights moving up the side of the massive volcano. It's not just Olympus Mons, Jiho said, pointing to his screen. Look at the other volcanoes. The same lights were appearing at every major volcano on Mars. The ancient network was powering up, preparing itself for what was coming. Message from Earth Control, Sunmai said, reading from her tablet. They're detecting unusual energy readings from all our Mars satellites. Whatever's happening down here, it's affecting everything in orbit too. Tae-young suddenly stood up from his desk. I found something important in the texts. The system isn't just defensive. It can reach out into space, far beyond Mars' orbit. That's why they built it into the volcanoes, Jaiho realized. They needed something tall enough to reach into space. The volcanoes are like giant towers. The ground shook again, stronger this time. Outside, the lights on Olympus Mons grew brighter, reaching high into the Martian sky. New message from Earth, Sun Mai announced, her voice tense. Their telescopes have spotted something entering the solar system. Multiple objects, moving fast. Hae-won's computer began beeping loudly. The defense system is reacting to them. Look at these energy readings. They watched as new holograms appeared in the air around them, projected by hidden systems in the station's walls. The holograms showed the solar system, with Mars clearly marked. Beyond it, multiple red dots approached. Earth wants to know if we can control this system, Sun Mai said. They need to know if it's safe, if we can trust it. Jaiho looked at the others. They had all seen the ancient records, the story of how Mars had died to save itself. Now they had to decide if they would risk everything on this ancient technology. Tell them yes, Jaiho said firmly. The Martians knew this day would come. They spent their last days building this system, making sure it would be ready when we needed it. As if responding to his words, the hologram changed, showing new details about the approaching objects. They were ships, just like the ones in the ancient records. They're coming faster than we thought. Hae-won said quietly. We have days, maybe less. The lights from Olympus Mons reached even higher into the sky, like a beacon lighting up the darkness of space. The ancient defense system was ready. Now they just had to hope they could understand it in time. Engineer Min-ho Kang arrived at the Olympus Mons research station on the last transport from Earth. As he stepped through the airlock, he could feel the vibrations in the floor from the active volcano nearby. Thank you for coming so quickly, Sun Mai greeted him. We need your expertise with these systems. Min-ho nodded, following her to the control room where the rest of the team worked. The room looked very different now. Ancient Martian symbols glowed on every wall, and holograms filled the air with moving images. The approaching ships will reach Mars in 3 days, Jaiho explained, showing Min-ho the main display. We need to have the defense system fully operational before then. Show me what you have so far, Min-ho said, setting down his equipment. He had spent the entire journey from Earth studying the data they had sent about the ancient technology. Hae-won brought up the system diagrams on a large screen. The volcanoes are like giant power stations. They channel energy up into space. The canyon acts as a focusing device, and the crater holds the targeting systems. Tae-young added more information from his translations. The ancient Martians designed it to work together. But starting it up after millions of years is proving difficult. Min-ho studied the diagrams carefully. These power flows are unstable, he noted, pointing to several flashing indicators. If we activate the full system like this, it might tear itself apart. The ground shook again, stronger than before. Outside the window, Olympus Mons glowed with strange lights that reached into the dark Martian sky. New data from the approaching ships, Sun Mai announced. They're accelerating. Earth Control says they'll reach us sooner than we thought. Min-ho moved quickly between the control stations. We need to balance the power flow between all the sites. The volcanoes, the canyon, the crater, they need to work as one system. Like an orchestra, Tae-young said, understanding. Every part needs to play in harmony. They worked through the night, adjusting power levels and stabilizing the ancient machinery. Min-ho's knowledge of modern systems helped them understand how the Martian technology worked. Look at this, Jaiho called out, pointing to new readings. The crater is sending out pulses of energy. It's scanning space, tracking the approaching ships. Hae-won checked her instruments. The canyon is responding. Its walls are shifting, aligning with the crater's signals. And the volcanoes are building up power, Minho added, watching the energy readings climb. The whole system is synchronizing itself. Suddenly, all the holograms changed color, showing new information. The approaching ships appeared as clear images now, their details visible for the first time. "They're huge," Sun Mai whispered. "Each one is bigger than our largest cities." "Message from Earth Control," Taiyang announced. "They're asking if the system will be ready in time." Minho looked at his calculations, then at the team. "We can do it, but we'll only get one chance. The power levels are too high for a second attempt." The ground shook again, and new lights appeared on the sides of all the major volcanoes across Mars. The ancient defense system was nearly ready. They had modified it, updated it, and prepared it as best they could. "Earth is asking for our confirmation," Sun Mai said. "Do we proceed?" Minho nodded slowly. "Tell them yes. The system is as ready as we can make it. Now we just have to trust that the ancient Martians knew what they were doing." Outside, Olympus Mons fired a bright beam of energy into space, a signal to the other volcanoes. The final countdown had begun. The alien ships appeared in Mars' sky as bright points of light, visible even during the day. From the observation deck of Olympus Mons Research Station, the team watched them grow larger with each passing hour. "Final report from Earth's telescopes," Sun Mai announced, reading from her tablet. 12 ships in total. They will reach Mars orbit in 6 hours. Minho worked at the main control panel, his fingers moving quickly across the ancient symbols. The defense system is running at 90% capacity. The power flow is stable between all sites. Around them, the walls of the research station hummed with energy from the activated Martian technology. Outside, Olympus Mons glowed with strange lights that pulsed in a steady rhythm. New data from Valles Marineris, HFY reported. The canyon walls are fully aligned. The focusing array is ready. Jiho studied the holograms floating in the center of the room. They showed the approaching ships in detail now. Each vessel was shaped like a dark crystal, with surfaces that seemed to absorb light. "Taiyang," he called out, "what do the ancient records say about their weapons?" Taiyang looked up from his translation screens. "The ships can fire energy beams that can crack a planet's crust. That's why the Martians built their defenses into the planet itself. They needed something strong enough to fight back." The ground shook as another burst of power flowed through the volcanic network. All across Mars, the major volcanoes glowed with the same pulsing light as Olympus Mons. "Message from Earth Control," Sun Mai said. "All Earth defense systems are on high alert. They're asking for our status." Minho checked his readings one final time. "Tell them we're ready. The system is charged. We can activate it as soon as the ships come into range." Suddenly, the holograms changed color, turning from blue to red. Warning symbols appeared in the ancient Martian script. "They're powering up their weapons," HFY said, watching her instruments. "All 12 ships are charging their main beams." "The crater's defensive screens are active," Jiho reported. "Hellas Planitia is ready to coordinate targeting across all sites." The alien ships moved into position around Mars, spreading out to surround the planet. Their dark surfaces began to glow with a threatening red light. "This is what the ancient Martians prepared for," Taiyang said quietly. "Their last gift to whoever would come after them. A chance to defend both Mars and Earth." Minho's control panel lit up with new symbols. "The system is giving us a warning. Once we activate the full defense network, we can't shut it down until the threat is eliminated. The power levels are too high." "Message from Earth," Sun Mai announced. "They're detecting energy buildups from the alien ships. They're about to fire." The team looked at each other. They had worked for weeks to understand and control this ancient technology. Now everything depended on whether they had done enough. "Send the activation signal," Jiho said firmly. "Let's show them why the Martians chose these volcanoes as their weapons." Minho pressed his hand against the glowing panel. All around Mars, The ancient defense system reached its full power. The coming battle would decide the fate of two worlds. The first alien beam struck Mars with tremendous force, but the ancient shields held. Energy from Hellas Planitia rose up to meet the attack, spreading across the sky like a protective dome. Shields at 80%. HFY reported from her station. The crater's defense system is working exactly as designed. Minho's hands moved quickly across the control panels, redirecting power from the dormant volcanoes. Olympus Mons is ready to respond. The great volcano rumbled beneath them. Through the observation windows, they watched as energy gathered at its peak, building into a bright column of light that reached into space. Targeting systems locked, Jiho announced. The canyon is focusing the energy beam. Olympus Mons fired. A blast of pure energy shot upward, guided by the walls of Valles Marineris. The beam struck one of the alien ships, causing its dark surface to crack with light. Direct hit, Sunmay called out. The ship's shields are failing. But the other 11 ships continued their attack. Their combined beams pressed down on Mars' protective shield, making the whole planet tremble. Shield strength dropping. HFY warned. 60%, 50%. Tai Young studied the ancient symbols racing across his screen. Wait, there's something else in the system. A secondary weapon we haven't activated yet. The ground shook harder as more alien beams struck Mars' surface. Inside the research station, emergency lights flashed. Look at this, Tai Young said, bringing up new holograms. The Martians built a resonance system into the planet's core. If we activate it, we can turn Mars itself into a weapon. Minho checked the power readings. The energy levels would be massive. We'd be using the planet's own magnetic field as a weapon. Shield at 30%. HFY reported. We need to do something now. Jiho looked at each member of the team. They all nodded. Do it, he said. Activate the core resonance. Minho and Tai Young worked together, entering the ancient commands. Deep beneath Mars' surface, something powerful began to wake up. The alien ships fired again. But this time something was different. Their beams seemed to bend and twist in space. Mars' magnetic field is changing, HFY said, watching her instruments in amazement. It's becoming a weapon itself. The entire planet hummed with power. Every volcano glowed at once, connected by lines of force that spread across the surface. In space, the alien ships tried to move away, but it was too late. Mars' new magnetic field reached out like a giant hand, grabbing the alien ships. Their own energy weapons turned against them, caught in the planet's powerful grip. It's working. Sunmay shouted over the noise of the humming machinery. The ships are breaking apart. One by one, the alien vessels cracked and shattered, torn apart by the combined power of Mars' volcanoes, canyon, and crater. The last ship tried to escape, but the magnetic field pulled it back, breaking it into pieces that burned up in Mars' atmosphere. When it was over, the team stood in silence, watching the light show of falling debris in the Martian sky. Message from Earth Control, Sunmay said softly. They're confirming all alien ships have been destroyed. We did it. The ancient machinery began to power down, but it didn't shut off completely. Instead, it settled into a steady hum, ready to defend Mars again if needed. The Martians knew what they were doing, Tai Young said, looking at the final translations on his screen. They didn't just build a defense system. They built a legacy, a way for humanity to protect both worlds. Outside, Olympus Mons stood quiet once more, its peak glowing softly in the setting sun. Mars had awakened to defend itself, and in doing so, had given humanity a gift, a way to protect their solar system for generations to come.